Story 1. The Mandatory Town Meetings. The lights came back on, and Maya Hutchins didn't recognize her own thoughts anymore. She was sitting in the Town Hall Auditorium, row 7, seat 12. Same seat as always. And everyone around her was smiling. She was smiling too. But somewhere deep in her mind, a voice was screaming that something had just been taken from her. Something important. She tried to remember what she'd been thinking about before the lights went down 30 seconds ago, but there was nothing there. Just static. And the worst part? She didn't care. The meeting organizer smiled from the podium and said, "Welcome home, Maya. You're one of us now." But how did Maya end up in that chair? What happened in the 30 seconds of darkness? To understand that, we need to go back 3 weeks. Maya had just moved to Pinewood Heights, Vermont, for a remote data analyst position. Population 1,847. The kind of place where neighbors brought welcome pies and everyone knew everyone. She'd received a letter on her 3rd day, official town stationery, embossed seal, announcing mandatory monthly town meetings. Mandatory seemed like a strong word, but she figured it was just small-town enthusiasm. The first meeting seemed normal enough. Almost. The town hall was packed, every seat filled. Everyone sat in the exact same spots, like assigned seating nobody talked about. No one checked their phones. No one whispered. For 90 minutes, they discussed parking ordinances and snow removal schedules with an intensity that felt wrong. But what happened next changed everything. The organizer, a man named Thomas Vance, who'd apparently run these meetings for 30 years, dimmed the lights and said, "Integration segment." That's when Maya noticed the screen behind him displaying everyone's names with check marks. Everyone except 3 people. Their names were highlighted in red. The lights went dark for exactly 30 seconds. And when they came back on, those 3 people were smiling differently, like they'd forgotten how to smile naturally and were copying everyone else. Maya told herself she was imagining things. 2 weeks later, she got her second meeting notice. This time, she was busy. She skipped it. The next morning, every single person in town treated her like she'd committed a crime. The barista forgot her coffee order. Her mailman delivered her packages to the wrong address. Neighbors stopped waving. Their eyes followed her everywhere she went with this hollow, disappointed expression. Then she found the town ordinance, and that's when the real horror began. Buried in the municipal code, subsection 47B. Residents who fail to attend 3 consecutive monthly meetings will be subject to voluntary relocation procedures. Voluntary. The word made her skin crawl. She searched the town archives for what relocation meant. There were no records of anyone ever leaving Pinewood Heights. Not in 30 years. Not a single moving truck. No forwarding, addresses. People just stopped existing in the records. She found a Reddit post from 2 years earlier, someone asking if anyone had heard from their cousin who lived in Pinewood Heights. The cousin had missed 3 meetings and then vanished. Phone disconnected. Social media accounts deleted. Employment records erased. But what really terrified Maya was the response to that post. Someone had written, "She didn't leave. She's still there. I saw her at the grocery store last month. But when I called her name, she looked right through me like we'd never met. Like I was a stranger." She had 2 choices. Attend the 3rd meeting or find out what voluntary relocation really meant. She chose the meeting. She chose wrong. The 3rd meeting started normally. Budget discussions, committee reports, until Thomas Vance dimmed the lights for the integration segment. This time, Maya's name was on the screen, highlighted in red, the only red name. The lights went out. And in the darkness, Maya heard something that explained everything. A low hum, rhythmic, pulsing, coming from speakers hidden throughout the auditorium. And underneath it, whispers. Hundreds of overlapping voices speaking in perfect unison, saying words she couldn't quite understand, but felt burrowing into her mind like worms. She tried to stand, to run, but her body wouldn't respond. The sound wrapped around her thoughts like fingers, pulling at memories, reshaping them. She felt herself slipping away, piece by piece, as if her personality was being carefully disassembled and replaced with something else. Something that belonged to the town. In those 30 seconds, the town didn't just program her mind, it erased her. When the lights came back, Maya remembered moving to Pinewood Heights. She remembered her job, her apartment, but she couldn't remember why she'd ever wanted to live anywhere else. The thought of leaving felt alien, wrong, like betraying family. The voice in the back of her mind screaming for help grew quieter with every second until it was just a whisper. Then nothing. She looked around the auditorium at all the smiling faces, and she smiled back. Because they were her people. This was her home. This was where she belonged. Thomas Vance asked if anyone had concerns about the proposed changes to the recycling schedule, and Maya's hand shot up. She had thoughts about recycling. Strong thoughts. It mattered so much now. Everything about this town mattered. And here's what will keep you up tonight. Maya Hutchins still lives in Pinewood Heights. 14 years now. She's never missed a meeting since. If you look her up on social media, her last post was from 3 weeks before her third meeting. It said, "Something's wrong with this town. If I don't post again, someone please." The post was never finished. She never posted again. But her account is still active. And if you check her location tags, she's still there. Every single day. Always in the same places, always smiling. In photos with the same neighbors, in the same seats, at the same monthly meetings. Someone in the comments asked if she was okay. Maya responded 6 months later with a single sentence. "I've never been happier." But if you look closely at the photo attached to that comment, at the reflection in the window behind her, you can see the town hall, and you can see all those people sitting in their assigned seats, in the dark, just waiting for the integration segment to begin again. Story 2. The Town with No Cemeteries. James Park stood in the middle of the old processing plant at 3 a.m., watching as the town council fed his neighbor's body into the industrial mulcher. Agnes had died peacefully in her sleep at 83 years old, and now she was being ground into fertilizer, while the council members stood around the machine like pallbearers at the world's most horrifying funeral. The plant manager turned to James with a gentle smile and said, "We take care of our own here in Crestwood Falls, Jim. Agnes will feed us for years. Rich soil, abundant crops. She's part of the community forever now. And someday, when your time comes, you will be too." But how did James end up here? In this nightmare factory at 3 in the morning, watching his sweet elderly neighbor become compost? To understand that, we need to go back 6 weeks. James had been a funeral director for 28 years before he took the job in Crestwood Falls, Colorado. Population 4,000. He'd handled the job postings for months, impressed by the salary and the charming Victorian house that came with the position. What sealed the deal was the town's promise that he'd have total creative control over establishing the first modern funeral home in Crestwood Falls. They'd never had one, the job listing explained, because the town was so healthy and vibrant. But with an aging population, They wanted to plan ahead. It seemed reasonable. But what happened next changed everything. James arrived on a Tuesday in late September, and the town was everything he'd hoped for. Tree-lined streets, friendly neighbors, a bustling farmer's market every weekend. But by Friday, he'd noticed something strange. He'd been exploring the town, looking for the cemetery so he could pay his respects and get a sense of the local burial customs. He couldn't find one. No graveyard, no memorial garden, no columbarium for cremated remains. Nothing. He asked the woman at the coffee shop where the cemetery was located, and she'd laughed like he'd made a joke. "People here live forever, Jim," she'd said with a wink. He'd laughed too, but her eyes hadn't been joking. That weekend, he went to the town hall and requested access to death records. The clerk, a nervous young man named David, had hesitated before pulling up the database. James watched the screen over his shoulder. The last recorded death in Crestwood Falls was in 1987, 37 years ago. A man named Robert Finch, age 92. Cause of death listed as natural causes. Before that, nothing for 6 years. And before that, scattered deaths decades apart. For a town of 4,000 people, the math was impossible. Statistically, there should be 40 to 50 deaths per year. But the records showed maybe one every 5 to 10 years. David had closed the laptop quickly and said, "Must be something wrong with the system. I'll have IT look into it." Then he'd ushered James out with a tight smile that didn't reach his eyes. James spent the next 2 weeks asking around, carefully, casually. And what he discovered terrified him. No one in town could remember a funeral. Not one. When he pressed harder, people would change the subject or suddenly remember an urgent appointment. The local newspaper archives showed no obituaries past 1987. He found online posts from people asking if anyone had heard from relatives who lived in Crestwood Falls, relatives who'd stopped answering calls. One post from 2019 said, "My aunt lived in Crestwood Falls for 40 years. She died last month. I know she did because her neighbor called me. But when I arrived to arrange the funeral, everyone in town insisted she'd moved to Arizona. Her house was empty. Her belongings were gone. No death certificate exists. It's like she never died." And that's when the real horror began. Then Agnes died. Sweet Agnes from next door, who'd brought him cookies on his first day and told him stories about the town's history. James found her on a Sunday morning when she didn't answer his knock. She was in her bed, peaceful, exactly how anyone would hope to go. He called 911. The operator said an ambulance was on the way. But instead of an ambulance, the town council arrived. 6 of them, including Mayor Patricia Holbrook, all wearing somber expressions and carrying what looked like moving supplies. The mayor had put her hand on James's shoulder and said, "We're so sorry for your loss. Agnes was a treasure. We'll take care of everything." When James said he'd handle the arrangements, that it was literally his job, the mayor's smile had tightened. "In Crestwood Falls, we have our own traditions. You'll understand soon enough." They'd taken Agnes's body before he could protest. That evening, James received a formal invitation to attend a community integration ceremony at midnight at the old Creston processing plant on the edge of town. The invitation was handwritten on expensive cardstock, but the message was clear. Attendance was not optional. What happened next still haunts him. He'd driven to the plant, an industrial building that supposedly processed the town's agricultural products for export. But when he arrived, he saw what they were really processing. The entire town council was there, along with about 30 other residents. Agnes's body was wrapped in biodegradable cloth and placed on a conveyor belt. Mayor Holbrook had given a beautiful eulogy, talking about Agnes's contributions to the community, her kindness, her love of gardening. Then she'd nodded to the plant manager, and the machine started. James had tried to stop them. He'd shouted, threatened to call the police. But the mayor had calmly explained that the police chief was standing right there. He was the one operating the mulcher. She'd explained that Crestwood Falls had been doing this since 1987, when the town made a collective decision to honor their dead in a more meaningful way. No graveyards taking up valuable land. No expensive caskets rotting in the ground. Instead, their loved ones became part of the earth that fed them. The crops grown in Crestwood Falls were legendarily fertile, exported across the country, making the town wealthy. And the secret ingredient was their dead. In those 30 seconds of watching Agnes disappear into that machine, James understood everything. The missing death records, the impossibly healthy crops, the fact that no one ever left Crestwood Falls. Because once you knew the truth, you were complicit. You couldn't report what you'd witnessed without admitting you'd stood there and watched. The town had built a perfect system of forced silence through shared guilt. James had stumbled backward, horrified, and the mayor had caught him. You're one of us now, James, and when your time comes, you'll feed us too. It's beautiful, really. True community. No one is ever truly gone. She gestured to the fields beyond the factory. Agnes is in those tomato plants, in that corn. She's in every meal we share. Isn't that more meaningful than a stone in the ground that no one visits? And here's what will keep you up tonight. James Parks still lives in Crestwood Falls. He's been there for 6 years now. He never opened his funeral home. Instead, he works at the processing plant. If you go to Crestwood Falls' website, you can see him in the community photos, smiling at the Harvest Festival, helping distribute produce to local families. There's even a testimonial from him. I moved to Crestwood Falls looking for community, and I found family. This town takes care of its own in ways I never imagined. And if you order organic vegetables from Creston Farms, their premium label that supplies whole foods in high-end restaurants across the country, you're eating crops grown in soil enriched by the bodies of Crestwood Falls residents. The company brags about their proprietary fertilizer blend. They call it community compost. They're not lying. And James? He just helped process another body last week. A man who'd tried to leave town and report what he'd seen. Car accident on the mountain road. Very tragic. Very convenient. The corn's going to be exceptional this year. Story 3. I found a door in the woods with my name on it. Ezra Cole was standing in an observation room overlooking his entire town, watching scientists monitor every resident through wall-mounted screens, when one of them turned and spoke directly into the intercom. Ezra, we know you're there. Come to the red door. It's time for your graduation anyway. You passed the test. The question is, do you want to know what you really are? That's when Ezra understood that his whole life had been a lie. That Millbrook, New Hampshire, wasn't a town at all, but an experiment. And he just discovered he was one of the subjects. But how did a 16-year-old kid end up miles beneath his hometown, staring at surveillance footage of people he'd known his entire life? To understand that, we need to go back 3 hours. Ezra had always loved the woods behind Millbrook. Population 1203, nestled in the White Mountains, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone, and nothing interesting ever happened. He'd spent countless afternoons exploring those woods, finding deer trails and old stone walls from farms that existed 100 years ago. It was a Tuesday afternoon in October when he decided to push deeper than usual, following a stream he'd never noticed before. The trees grew denser here, blocking out the autumn sun, and the air felt colder somehow. That's when he saw it. A metal door, industrial-looking, built directly into the side of a hill like a fallout shelter. But what made his blood run cold was the brass nameplate bolted to the center. Ezra Cole. His name. His exact name. Engraved in perfect letters. What happened next changed everything. His first thought was that it was a prank. His friends messing with him, maybe some elaborate joke for his birthday next week. But when he touched the nameplate, it was old. Weathered. The kind of patina that takes years to develop. This had been here for a long time. And how would anyone even know he'd come this way? He hadn't told anyone where he was going. His hands were shaking as he tried the handle. It turned easily, the door swinging inward with a pneumatic hiss that suggested regular maintenance. Beyond was a staircase, concrete steps descending into darkness, lit by dim emergency lights every 10 feet. He should have run, should have called someone. But the door had his name on it, his name. He had to know why. The stairs went down for what felt like forever. Ezra counted 247 steps before reaching a corridor. Clean white walls, fluorescent lighting, the kind of sterile environment you'd find in a hospital or research facility. The walls were covered in photographs, and as he walked closer, his stomach dropped. They were all of him. Baby pictures he'd never seen. Photos of him at school events his parents had never attended. Him walking to the bus stop last Tuesday. Him in his bedroom last night, taken from an angle that suggested a camera hidden in his ceiling. Hundreds of photos, documenting every moment of his 16 years, many of them from angles and locations that should have been impossible. That's when the real horror began. He moved faster now, his breathing ragged, passing doors with labels like Subject Monitoring, EC, and Behavioral Analysis, Cole, E. At the end of the corridor was a room with filing cabinets, dozens of them, each drawer labeled with dates. He pulled open the one marked 2024 and found manila folders stuffed with documents, medical reports, psychological evaluations, incident logs, all about him. One report read, Subject EC shows increased resistance to Protocol 7. Recommend dosage increase in municipal water supply. Expected compliance by age 18. Another, Subject displays above-average problem-solving skills. Genetic markers consistent with target profile A. Recommend continued observation for potential graduation to Phase 2. Then he discovered the other drawers. Each filing cabinet corresponded to a different teenager in Millbrook. Sarah Chen, Marcus Webb. Every kid in his high school had their own drawer, their own surveillance files, their own coded reports about protocols and dosages and compliance targets. Millbrook wasn't raising children. It was cultivating them. He found a map on the wall showing the entire underground complex. It was massive, sprawling beneath the whole town like a shadow mirror. And there were other doors, dozens of them, spread throughout the woods, each presumably with a different name. But what he saw next made him understand the true scope of what was happening. He followed the corridor deeper, past laboratories with equipment he didn't recognize, past rooms with viewing windows that showed empty beds with restraints. Then he found the observation room, a large space filled with monitors, each one showing a different location in Millbrook. The grocery store, the school cafeteria, the church, people's bedrooms, every angle covered. Every resident unknowingly broadcast to this underground nerve center. And there were scientists, 3 of them, in white coats, watching the screens with the casual attention of people monitoring a long-term experiment. One of them was making notes on a clipboard labeled Daily Behavioral Metrics, Population Control Study. Another was adjusting something on a control panel beneath a screen showing Ezra's own house, where his mother was making dinner, completely unaware that her every movement was being recorded and analyzed. That's when Ezra heard footsteps behind him. He spun around and saw more doors, each painted different colors: red, blue, green, yellow. The red door was closest, and above it was a sign: Phase 2, Transition, Graduated Subjects. Before he could run, one of the scientists noticed him on a monitor. The woman's voice came through an intercom he hadn't seen, calm and almost warm. "Ezra, we know you're there. Come to the red door. It's time for your graduation anyway. You passed the test." He backed away, but her voice followed him through hidden speakers. "Finding this facility was the final examination. We've been monitoring your problem-solving abilities, your curiosity, your resistance to the compliance protocols in the water. You're ready." The other scientists had stopped working now, all watching him through the observation window with expressions that weren't hostile, but weren't quite friendly either. Clinical interest, like researchers watching a lab rat complete a maze. The woman continued, "The question is, do you want to know what you really are? What we've been preparing you for? You can open the red door and graduate to the next phase. Or you can try to run, try to tell people, try to expose this. But Ezra, every adult in Millbrook knows. Your parents know. Your teachers know. This is a controlled environment. Everyone over 18 has either been recruited or replaced. The entire town exists for one purpose: to produce children with specific genetic and psychological profiles. And you're one of our best results. The red door, Ezra. Your choice. And here's what will keep you up tonight." Ezra Cole posted this story to NoSleep 3 years ago. The account is still active, but he never posted again. No comments, no replies. Just silence. The post was submitted from Millbrook, New Hampshire, which you can find on any map. Population 1,203, exactly as he described. In the weeks after his post, people from Reddit tried to investigate. 2 users claimed they drove to Millbrook and found it completely normal. Charming, even. But both mentioned that the teenagers they talked to seemed weirdly well-adjusted, and that every adult they asked about Ezra gave the exact same response, word for word. He moved away for a special program. We're very proud of him. One Redditor tried to file a missing person report, but police said Ezra wasn't missing. His parents confirmed he'd enrolled in an advanced study program and was doing well. When pressed for details, they provided documentation showing Ezra at a preparatory academy in Massachusetts. Except the academy doesn't exist. The address is an empty lot. And if you search for Millbrook, New Hampshire missing children, you'll find scattered posts going back 15 years, all describing similar patterns. Teenagers posting strange stories online, then disappearing from the internet. Their parents always saying they went to special programs. And the population of Millbrook? Still exactly 1,203. Never more, never less. For the last 30 years. Story number 4. The town where everyone has the same birthday. Indira Patel stared at her driver's license under the fluorescent lights of the Thornfield, Arkansas Town Hall, and the birth date had changed. It didn't say June 3rd, 1993 anymore. It said October 19th, 1993. The same birthday as every single person in this town of 2,600 residents. She checked her passport. October 19th. Her credit cards. October 19th. Even the photo on her phone's lock screen, a picture of her birthday cake from last June, now showed a cake with candles and a banner reading, "Happy Birthday, Indira, October 19th. She couldn't remember when it changed. She couldn't remember celebrating in June at all. It was like her entire life had been rewritten, and she was the only one who noticed the edit. But how did a census worker end up trapped in a town where reality itself bends to match a collective delusion? To understand that, we need to go back 2 weeks. Indira worked for the U.S. Census Bureau, specializing in data anomaly investigation. When statistical impossibilities appeared in the data, she was sent to verify them in person. Thornfield, Arkansas had been flagged by the system for an error so bizarre that 3 different analysts had assumed it was a database glitch. According to official records, all 2,600 residents shared the same birthday, October 19th. Different years spanning from 1924 to 2024, but always the same month and day. The odds of this occurring naturally were astronomical, somewhere in the realm of winning the lottery while being struck by lightning. Twice. Her supervisor had laughed it off as a data entry mistake, probably some clerk who'd accidentally copied the same date into every field. But Indira was thorough. She decided to visit Thornfield and verify the records in person. What happened next changed everything. The town was nestled in the Ozark foothills, about 40 miles from the nearest highway. Picture perfect in that unsettling way small towns sometimes are, like a movie set that's trying too hard to look authentic. White church steeple, brick storefronts, American flags on every porch. She arrived on October 12th, exactly 1 week before the supposed shared birthday, and immediately noticed decorations everywhere. Banners reading "Town Birthday Celebration, October 19th," hung across Main Street. Every shop window displayed birthday-themed decorations. The bakery had a sign advertising "Annual Birthday Cake Pickup, Order Now." When she asked the woman at the town's administrative office to see birth certificates, the clerk had smiled warmly and said, "Oh, you're here for the birthday. Are you staying for the celebration? It's quite something." Indira had clarified that she was with the Census Bureau, investigating a data discrepancy. The clerk's smile never wavered. "No discrepancy, dear. We're all October 19th babies. It's tradition." Tradition. That word kept coming up. Indira spent the next 3 days interviewing residents, and every single person confirmed it cheerfully. Yes, they were born on October 19th. Yes, every person in town shared the birthday. No, they didn't find it strange. When she pressed for explanations, she got variations of the same response. It's just how it's always been, and it's part of what makes Thornfield special, and most unsettlingly, you'll understand after you've been here a while. She checked the town's historical records at the library. Thornfield was founded on October 19th, 1919, exactly 106 years ago. The founder, a man named Silas Thornfield, had been an occultist and mystic who'd purchased 5,000 acres of land and recruited followers to build a perfect community. His journals, kept in a locked case in the library's special collection, described rituals for binding souls to sacred land and birthing the collective consciousness. That's when the real horror began. One journal entry from October 18th, 1919 read, "Tomorrow we perform the great binding. Every soul who dwells upon this land shall be born anew. Their individual sparks merged into the eternal flame of Thornfield. They will share one birth, one purpose, one heartbeat. The land will own them, and they will own the land, forever intertwined. Those who come after will be absorbed into the collective, their false birthdays erased, their true genesis revealed as October 19th. For that is when Thornfield itself was born, and all who dwell here are children of the town." Indira photographed every page with shaking hands. This was insane. A cult ritual from 1919 couldn't actually change birth records, couldn't alter reality itself. except when she looked at the town's birth certificates from the 1920s, 30s, and 40s. They all said October 19th. Marriage licenses, death certificates, every official document, October 19th. She tried to leave on October 17th, packed her car, checked out of the bed and breakfast, and drove toward the highway. But every road she took looped back to Main Street. GPS showed her driving in straight lines toward the interstate, but the scenery kept cycling past the same landmarks. The church, the bakery, the town square. After the fifth loop, she pulled over and called her supervisor. The call connected, but when her supervisor answered, his voice sounded distant, distorted. Indira? Where are you calling from? Our records show you completed the Thornfield investigation and returned to the office 3 days ago. She insisted she was still in Thornfield, still trying to leave. He paused, then said, Indira, I'm looking at your desk right now. Your coffee mug is still warm. Are you feeling all right? The call disconnected. When she tried again, her phone showed no service, even though the bars had been full seconds earlier. She returned to the bed and breakfast because she had nowhere else to go. The owner, a woman in her 70s named Margaret, was setting up decorations for the birthday celebration. Oh, good, you're back. I was hoping you'd stay for the party. It's tomorrow, you know. Our birthday. Indira asked what would happen if she didn't attend the celebration. Margaret's smile tightened just slightly. Everyone attends, dear. It's not optional. It's the day we were all born. The day we all belonged to Thornfield completely. That night, Indira heard singing. She looked out her window and saw the entire town gathered in the square, holding candles, singing in a language she didn't recognize. They were all facing the same direction, toward a stone monument she hadn't noticed before. A marker engraved with October 19th, 1919, the day Thornfield was born. And they were all smiling the exact same smile. October 19th arrived. Indira woke to find a birthday card slid under her door. Inside, in elegant script. Happy birthday, Indira. Welcome home. She hadn't told anyone in town about her actual birthday. She checked her phone's calendar, planning to confirm today's date. But every entry she'd made for the past month had shifted. Meetings she'd scheduled for different dates now all showed October 19th. Photos she'd taken throughout her life, ones she'd looked at hundreds of times, now had dates stamped October 19th, regardless of when they'd actually been taken. Her driver's license said October 19th, 1993. Her passport said October 19th. Even her birth certificate, which she'd photographed and saved to her cloud storage before arriving in Thornfield, now showed October 19th when she opened the file. Then the worst thing happened. She couldn't remember her real birthday. She tried to recall celebrating in June, but the memories were fuzzy, like trying to remember a dream after waking. She remembered a party, but was it June? Or had it always been October? Her mother had baked a cake. What kind? What year? The details slipped away like water through her fingers. She checked her text messages with her mom, scrolling back to June, and found a message from herself saying, "Thanks for the birthday wishes, Mom. October is going to be great this year." She had never sent that message. She had never celebrated a birthday in October in her entire life. But the phone insisted she had. Reality insisted she had. And now her own mind was starting to agree. What happened next made her realize escape was impossible. Margaret knocked on her door at noon, dressed in party clothes, carrying a wrapped gift. "Time for the celebration, birthday girl. The whole town is waiting." Indira followed her to the town square in a daze. where all 2,600 residents had gathered around a massive birthday cake, 106 candles burning on top. When she arrived, everyone turned to look at her and sang "Happy Birthday" in perfect unison. Not just to her, to everyone, to Thornfield itself. They cut the cake and distributed pieces to every resident. And when Indira bit into hers, she tasted something strange. Metallic. Old. Like earth and copper and something she couldn't name. The mayor stood on a platform and announced, "Today marks another year of our collective existence. We are Thornfield. Thornfield is us. We are born together, we live together, and someday we will return to the land together." Everyone applauded. Indira applauded too, though she didn't remember deciding to. And here's what will keep you up tonight. Indira Patel still works for the Census Bureau. She still lives in Thornfield, Arkansas. Her employment records show she requested a transfer to work remotely from her hometown of Thornfield 6 months ago. Her social media shows photos of her attending the October 19th birthday celebration every year, smiling with neighbors, cutting cake, singing with the crowd. In every photo, she's holding a birthday card that says, "Happy Birthday, Indira." If you search for Thornfield, Arkansas, you'll find it easily. Population 2,601 now. One more than when Indira arrived. The town website has a cheerful welcome page inviting visitors to attend the annual birthday celebration every October 19th. "Come celebrate with us," it says. You might just decide to stay forever. And if you look very carefully at the town's official census data, available through public records, you'll see that every single resident, all 2,601 of them, shares the same birthday. October 19th. Different years, but always the same day. And the most recent addition to the population registry shows Indira Patel, born October 19th, 1993, lifelong resident of Thornfield. She's been trying to leave for 6 years now. Every morning she packs her car, every road brings her back, and every night she finds herself forgetting why she ever wanted to leave at all. Story 5. My small town's church takes confession very seriously. Father Anton Reeves was standing in the church basement at 3 a.m., staring at the holding cells, when Father Marcus handed him a set of keys and said, "You've been down here 3 nights in a row, Anton. You know what we do. You know why we do it. The only question left is whether you're going to take the collar off and try to run, or if you're going to step into that confession booth and tell me about the 6 children from your last parish, the ones whose screams still wake you up at night." That's when Anton understood he wasn't investigating the horrors of Salvation Point, Louisiana. He'd been recruited to join them. But how does a 58-year-old priest with a guilty conscience end up trapped in a church that uses confession booths as interrogation rooms and keeps sinners in cages beneath the sanctuary? To understand that, we need to go back 4 weeks. Anton had spent 30 years as a parish priest before he retired in shame. Not publicly. The diocese had quietly reassigned him, then quietly suggested early retirement. And Anton had quietly agreed because the alternative was criminal prosecution. He'd looked the other way. 6 children in his parish had reported abuse by another priest. And Anton had convinced them to stay silent, convinced their parents it would destroy the church community, convinced himself it was for the greater good. Then one of those children had died by suicide at 17, leaving a note that named every adult who'd known and done nothing. Anton's name was at the top. The lawsuit was settled quietly. The diocese paid millions, and Anton lived with the knowledge that his cowardice had killed a child. What happened next changed everything. He'd been living alone in a small apartment in Baton Rouge, drinking too much and sleeping too little, when he received a letter from Father Marcus Chen, head priest of Our Lady of Perpetual Mercy in Salvation Point. The letter said the parish needed an assistant priest, someone with experience, someone who understood that confession wasn't just about forgiveness, but about justice. The salary was generous, the housing was provided, and most importantly, the letter said, "We know what you did, Anton. We know what you carry. Come to Salvation Point. We have a way to make it right." Anton told himself he was going to investigate, to see if this was some kind of blackmail scheme. But really, he was just desperate for any chance at redemption, even if it came from a source he didn't trust. Salvation Point was deep in Bayou country, population 3,847. The kind of place where Spanish moss hung from cypress trees like funeral shrouds, and the air smelled like swamp water and decay. The church was the largest building in town, a Gothic stone structure that looked like it belonged in medieval Europe, not rural Louisiana. Father Marcus greeted him warmly, a man in his 50s with kind eyes and a firm handshake. He showed Anton the rectory, a comfortable house behind the church with a library and a garden. Everything seemed normal until Father Marcus took him to see the confession booth. It wasn't the standard wooden booth with a screen and kneeler. This one had modifications, leather restraints built into the kneeling rail, soundproofing panels on the walls, and when Anton looked down, he saw a drain in the floor. That's when the real horror began. Father Marcus had smiled and said, "We take confession very seriously here, Anton. When someone comes to confess, we need to be sure they're telling the complete truth. The restraints help them resist the temptation to flee before they fully unburden themselves. The soundproofing ensures privacy. And the drain, well, sometimes the process of true confession is messy." Anton had asked what he meant by messy, and Father Marcus had invited him to observe a confession that evening. A man named Robert Guidry was scheduled, a local contractor. Anton watched from a small observation window as Robert entered the booth and knelt. Father Marcus asked the standard opening, "What brings you to confession, my son?" Robert confessed to tax fraud. Father Marcus listened patiently, then said, "And what else?" Robert insisted there was nothing else. Father Marcus pressed a button, and the restraints snapped around Robert's wrists and ankles. "Let's try again," Father Marcus said, his voice still gentle. "What else have you done?" Over the next 40 minutes, Anton watched as Robert's confession escalated under Father Marcus's patient, relentless questioning. The tax fraud was real but minor. What came out under pressure was darker: domestic violence, embezzling from his business partner, blackmail, sexual assault of a teenage employee. Each confession extracted through a combination of psychological pressure and the implied threat of those restraints. When Robert finally broke down, sobbing and confessing everything, Father Marcus had nodded in satisfaction and said, "Good. Now comes your penance." He explained that Robert would pay restitution to his victims. He would turn himself in to authorities. He would serve whatever sentence the court imposed. And if he refused, the church had detailed recordings of his confession, which would be released to law enforcement and the public. Robert had no choice. He agreed to everything. Father Marcus released the restraints, blessed him, and sent him on his way. Then he turned to Anton and said, "That's how we handle confession here. We extract the truth, then we enforce justice. The diocese can hide predators. We expose them." Anton should have left immediately. Should have reported what he'd seen to someone, anyone. But Father Marcus asked him a question that stopped him cold. "How many confessions did you hear in your 30 years, Anton? How many serious crimes did people admit to you, expecting forgiveness without consequences?" How many times did you grant absolution to people who never changed, never paid for their sins, never made their victims whole? Anton had no answer, because the truth was, he'd done exactly that. Hundreds of times. He'd heard confessions of abuse, theft, violence, and he'd offered prayers and penance, then sent those people back into the world with a clean conscience and no accountability. Father Marcus had smiled sadly and said, "We're trying to fix that here. We use confession as it was meant to be used, as a tool for truth and justice, not just comfort. You don't have to participate, but you also can't leave and report us. Because if you do, we'll release your confession to the world. The 6 children, your cowardice, everything." That night, Father Marcus showed him the basement. Anton had expected a wine cellar or storage room. Instead, he found holding cells, 6 of them, each containing a person. Father Marcus explained that these were parishioners who'd confessed to serious crimes but refused to accept their penance. They claimed they'd been coerced, that their confessions weren't valid, that they'd sue the church if anyone tried to turn them in. So the church kept them here as eternal penitents, working off their sins through forced labor for the community. One woman had confessed to slowly poisoning her elderly mother for inheritance money. She'd been in the basement for 3 years, maintaining the church grounds, cooking for parish events, living in her cell. A man had confessed to running a puppy mill where animals died in filth and neglect. He'd been here for 5 years, now caring for the church's animals with obsessive devotion. Father Marcus called it corrective penance. Anton called it imprisonment. But Father Marcus had calmly replied, "They chose this. They could have accepted legal consequences. Instead, they claimed their confessions were invalid. So we're keeping them here until they're ready to face real justice, or until they've worked off their debt to God and community. Whichever comes first." Anton had tried to leave on the 3rd night, packed his bags, got in his car, started driving toward the highway. But he only made it 2 miles before he pulled over, shaking, and turned around. Because Father Marcus had been right about one thing. Anton had enabled evil his entire career. He'd protected abusers, comforted predators, and called it mercy. And now he had a chance to actually do something about evil, even if the method was horrifying. He returned to the church and asked Father Marcus what happened to priests who confessed. Father Marcus had led him to the confession booth and said, "Step inside and find out." Anton had confessed everything. The 6 children, his cowardice, the suicide, the cover-up. And when he finished, Father Marcus had said, "Your penance is 30 years of service here. You will help us extract confessions. You will help us enforce justice. And you will live every day knowing you're finally doing what you should have done from the beginning, making sinners face consequences. And here's what will keep you up tonight. Father Anton Reeves still works at Our Lady of Perpetual Mercy in Salvation Point, Louisiana. 6 years now. If you visit the church's website, you'll see him in photos, smiling at community events, leading Bible study, hearing confessions. The church has an impeccable reputation in the region. Crime in Salvation Point has dropped 73% since Father Marcus took over 20 years ago. Domestic violence incidents, nearly 0. Sexual assault reports, nearly 0. White-collar crime, nearly 0. The local police chief credits the church's community accountability programs. What he doesn't mention is that the church basement now holds 14 people in those cells, all serving penance for crimes they confessed to, but refused to face legal consequences for. And the confession booth has been upgraded. Better soundproofing, stronger restraints, and a more efficient drain system because Father Marcus was right. True confession is messy. There's a reason the basement floor is always spotless, scrubbed clean every morning by penitents who understand exactly what they're washing away. And if you ever visit Salvation Point, if you ever feel compelled to confess your sins to Father Anton or Father Marcus, remember this: they will make you tell the truth, all of it. And once they know what you've done, you'll have two choices: face the legal system or face the basement. Most people choose the basement. They think it'll be easier. But the average stay is 8 years. And some of the penitents have been down there so long, they've forgotten what sunlight looks like. They just work and pray and scrub the floors and wait for the day Father Marcus decides they've suffered enough to earn their freedom. That day rarely comes. Story 6. The town where children choose their parents. Lucia Ose watched from the car window as her 5-year-old daughter Amara waved goodbye from the porch of another family's house, smiling in a way she'd never smiled before, like she'd finally found where she belonged. And the town escort officer put a hand on Lucia's shoulder and said, "Time to go, ma'am. Your daughter made her choice. The town keeps its children. You were just the incubator." That's when Lucia understood that Meadowbrook, Idaho didn't invite families to move here to raise successful children. It invited families to grow children for the town to keep. But how does a mother end up being escorted out of town, forced to leave her only child behind with strangers who insist they're now her real parents? To understand that nightmare, we need to go back 9 months. Lucia and her husband Grant had been researching the best places to raise a family for over a year. They both had good remote jobs, no ties to any particular location, and a 4-year-old daughter named Amara who deserved the best possible start in life. That's when they found Meadowbrook. Population 2,400. Perfect schools with a 100% college acceptance rate. Zero crime. Test scores consistently in the top 99th percentile nationally. A waiting list of over 4,000 families desperate to move there. The town's website showed happy children playing in pristine parks, diverse families attending community events, and testimonials from parents calling it paradise for raising kids. There was one unusual policy mentioned in the town charter. Children turned 5 participated in a selection ceremony where they chose which family unit they felt most connected to. The website explained it as a beautiful tradition celebrating children's autonomy and ensuring every child lived with parents they truly bonded with. What happened next changed everything. Lucia and Grant had been skeptical at first. The selection ceremony sounded bizarre, almost cultish. But they researched deeper and found that 98% of children chose their biological parents. The town explained that the ceremony was mostly symbolic, a way to affirm the parent-child bond and give children agency in their family structure. The 2% who chose different families were usually cases where abuse or neglect had been documented, and the ceremony gave those children a safe way to find better homes. It seemed progressive, even enlightened. So they applied, went through an intensive vetting process, and were accepted. They moved to Meadowbrook in January, when Amara was 4. They had 14 months before her 5th birthday and her selection ceremony. 14 months to bond with their daughter and ensure she'd choose them. 14 months that now felt like a carefully orchestrated trap. The first few months were perfect. Amara loved her new preschool. Lucia and Grant made friends with neighbors. The town was everything it promised to be. Safe, clean, supportive. But as Amara's 5th birthday approached in March, Lucia started noticing things. Other families with soon-to-be 5-year-olds looked stressed, anxious. At community events, parents would cluster together, whispering nervously about their children's behavior, analyzing every interaction for signs of which family their child might choose. One mother confided to Lucia that her son had started spending more time with a neighbor family, and she was terrified he'd choose them instead. When Lucia asked what would happen if he did, the mother's face had gone pale. "We'd have to leave. That's the rule. Rejected parents aren't allowed to stay in Meadowbrook. It would be too disruptive for the child's development." That's when the real horror began. Lucia started researching the town's history more carefully. She found online forums where rejected parents shared their experiences, though most posts were deleted quickly. One archived thread from 3 years ago described the selection ceremony in detail. Children stand on a stage in the town square, and every family in town gathers below. The child is asked which parents they choose. If they choose their biological parents, everyone celebrates. If they choose different parents, the biological parents are given 30 minutes to say goodbye before being escorted out of town permanently. No custody arrangements, no visitation rights. The child legally becomes the property of the chosen family, with all documentation changed to reflect the new parents. One rejected mother had written, "They changed her birth certificate, her name, everything. It's like I never gave birth to her. I hired lawyers, but Meadowbrook has connections at the state level. No judge would take the case. My daughter is gone, and legally, I was never her mother." Lucia tried to talk to Grant about leaving before Amara turned 5, but he refused. "We're overthinking this," he said. "Amara loves us. She'll choose us. And even if there's a small risk, look at what she'll gain. The best education in the country. A future without limits." Lucia watched him closely and realized he'd already been compromised. He'd drunk the town's water, attended their community meetings, absorbed their propaganda about children's psychic connections and optimal family bonding. He believed Meadowbrook's lie, that children could sense which adults would best serve their development, that 5-year-olds had mystical insight into family compatibility. The truth, which Lucia discovered in banned town archives hidden in the library's special collection, was far darker. Meadowbrook had been founded in 1968 by a psychologist named Dr. Helena Vance, who believed children were born psychically connected to an ideal parental entity that might not be their biological parents. She'd experimented with various methods of identifying these connections, eventually claiming she'd found a way to awaken children's latent psychic abilities at exactly age 5. The archives contained Dr. Vance's research notes, and they were horrifying. She'd been dosing the town's water supply with a compound she called resonance serum, a mixture of psychotropic drugs and what she claimed was distilled human pineal gland extract. According to her notes, the serum made children hypersensitive to emotional manipulation and psychic suggestion. During the months leading up to their 5th birthday, children subconsciously absorbed messages from every adult they encountered, and whichever adult projected the strongest desired parent signal would be selected during the ceremony. Biological parents, stressed and desperate to be chosen, often projected anxiety and neediness. Other adults in town, coached by Dr. Vance's successors, projected calm confidence and unconditional acceptance. The children invariably chose the calmer signal. It wasn't psychic bonding. It was psychological manipulation on a massive scale. And once children were separated from their biological parents, they were raised in what Dr. Vance called optimal conditions to produce exceptional students, athletes, and future leaders. Meadowbrook's perfect success rates weren't because of superior parenting. They were because of systematic childhood programming. Amara's 5th birthday arrived on March 19th. The selection ceremony was scheduled for 2 p.m. in the town square. Lucia had spent the previous week trying to deprogram Amara, trying to counteract whatever influence the town had been exerting. But every time she asked Amara who she wanted to live with, Amara would look confused and say things like, "I love you, Mommy, but there are other people who understand me better." Or, "Mr. and Mrs. Chen make me feel calm inside." The Chens were a couple in their 40s who lived 3 houses down. They had no biological children. They'd been in Meadowbrook for 20 years, veteran participant in the selection system. They'd raised 6 children, none of them biologically theirs. They were collectors, professionals at projecting the emotional signals that made children choose them. And they'd been targeting Amara for months, inviting her over for cookies, reading her favorite books, playing her favorite games, all while Grant smiled and encouraged the interaction because he genuinely believed it was healthy socialization. The ceremony was exactly as the forums described. 200 people gathered in the square. 10 children turned 5 this month, and they stood on the stage in age order. 9 children went before Amara. 8 chose their biological parents. 1 boy chose his neighbors, a couple who specialized in athletic training. The boy's biological parents sobbed as they were escorted to their car and driven out of town, the father shouting that this wasn't legal, that someone would stop this. No one stopped it. Then it was Amara's turn. She looked so small on that stage, wearing the white dress the town had provided for the ceremony. The mayor asked the traditional question, "Amara Osei, you have lived in Meadowbrook for 14 months. In that time, you have encountered many families. Which parents do you choose to raise you? Who do you feel connected to in your heart?" Amara looked at Lucia and Grant. For one moment, Lucia thought she saw confusion in her daughter's eyes, like Amara was trying to remember something important. But then Amara's gaze drifted to the Chens, standing calmly in the crowd, and her face relaxed. She pointed at them and said, "I choose Mr. and Mrs. Chen." What happened next was efficient and practiced. Town officials immediately approached Lucia and Grant, guiding them away from the crowd toward a designated transition area behind the town hall. They were allowed to hug Amara goodbye, but only for 2 minutes. Mrs. Chen was already kneeling beside Amara, whispering in her ear, and Amara was nodding and smiling. When Lucia tried to pull Amara into a longer hug, to whisper that she loved her, that she'd find a way to get her back, Amara had gently pulled away and said, "It's okay, Lucia. You did your job. You made me. Now my real parents will raise me." Lucia, not Mommy. Her daughter had called her by her first name, like they were acquaintances. Grant was crying, but also nodding, like he understood and accepted this outcome. The programming had worked on him. He believed this was natural, right? Best for Amara. Lucia was the only one who still saw it for what it was. Kidnapping disguised as child autonomy. And here's what will keep you up tonight. Lucia Osei tried everything to get Amara back. She filed police reports in 3 states, hired lawyers, contacted the FBI, claiming child trafficking. Every case was dismissed. Meadowbrook's documentation was flawless. Birth certificates showing the Chens as Amara's parents from birth. Hospital records, school enrollment. Even photos that Lucia knew had been photoshopped showed Mrs. Chen pregnant, showed the Chens holding baby Amara in the hospital. The town had erased Lucia's motherhood completely. When she tried to visit Meadowbrook, she was arrested for trespassing and harassment. When she tried to contact Amara through social media, she found that Amara's name had been changed to Amara Chen, and her accounts were restricted. Grant filed for divorce 6 months later. He'd accepted what happened and wanted to move on. He's remarried now, living in Oregon, and according to public records, his new wife is pregnant. They've already applied to move to Meadowbrook. Meanwhile, Amara Chen, is now 11 years old. Her test scores are exceptional. She's captain of her soccer team. She plays violin at a professional level. Meadowbrook's website features her in promotional materials as an example of their success. In interviews, she talks about how grateful she is for her wonderful parents who have supported her development. There's no mention of Lucia. No acknowledgement that another woman carried her for 9 months, raised her for the first 5 years of her life, loved her unconditionally. Meadowbrook has 4,800 families on its waiting list now. All of them desperate to move there for the schools, the safety, the perfect success rates. None of them realize they're not moving there to raise children. They're moving there to grow them. And at age 5, the town decides who gets to keep what they've grown. The selection ceremony happens every month. Every month, 2 or 3 families are escorted out of town, sobbing, empty-armed, erased. And every month, new families move in, hopeful and naive, convinced their bond with their child is strong enough that they'll be in the 98% who get chosen. They're wrong. Lucia has been tracking the real statistics through rejected parent networks. In the last 10 years, the selection rate for biological parents has dropped to 62%. The town is keeping more and more children, building its perfect community, one stolen child at a time. And there's nothing anyone can do to stop it. Story 7. I realized my entire town is rehearsing for something. Tomas Rivera was standing in his front yard at 3 a.m., watching every single person in town move in perfect synchronization through the streets like they were performing choreography. When his neighbor Mrs. Kellerman walked past without acknowledging him and took her position in the town square around a marked spot labeled Newcomer. And that's when he heard the sound of a car approaching on the distant highway, headlights cutting through the darkness, and everyone in the square turned to look at him simultaneously with identical smiles, and Mrs. Kellerman said, "Don't worry, Thomas. You were the last newcomer. You're part of the family now. Let's welcome them together." That's when Thomas understood he wasn't watching a rehearsal. He was watching preparation for an arrival, and he was no longer the prey. He was being recruited to become a hunter. But how does a 44-year-old insomniac end up standing in his small town at 3 a.m. watching 1,600 people perform what looks like a ritual abduction? To understand that nightmare, we need to go back 6 weeks. Tomas had always struggled with sleep. Chronic insomnia since his 20s, usually averaging 3 to 4 hours per night. He'd tried everything: medication, therapy, meditation, sleep studies. Nothing worked. So when he took a remote IT consulting job and decided to move somewhere quiet and peaceful, he chose Fogwood, Maine, specifically for its reputation as the most boring town in New England. Population 1,623. Nothing ever happened there. No bars, no nightlife. Streets rolled up at 9 p.m. Perfect for someone who'd be awake all night anyway. He moved in mid-August, bought a small house on Maple Street, and settled into a routine of working nights and existing in his own isolated bubble. What happened next changed everything. The first time he noticed the lights, it was September 3rd, exactly 2 weeks after he'd moved in. He was at his computer at 2:47 a.m. when he noticed his neighbor's bedroom light turn on, then the house next to theirs, then the one across the street. Within 5 minutes, every house on his street had lights turning on in a specific sequence, like dominoes falling. He watched through his window as people emerged from their homes, families, elderly couples, teenagers, all dressed in normal sleepwear, all moving with purpose down their driveways and into the street. No one was talking. No one looked confused or alarmed. They just walked in formation toward the center of town. Tomas watched from his window for 20 minutes as his entire neighborhood emptied out, then slowly returned. Lights went off in reverse sequence. By 3:30 a.m., everything was dark again. He convinced himself he'd imagined it, some kind of waking dream brought on by sleep deprivation. But it happened again on September 10th. Same time, same sequence, same purposeful movement. This time, Thomas went outside and tried to talk to his neighbor, Mr. Chen, who was walking past his house. "Everything okay?" Thomas called out. Mr. Chen didn't respond, didn't even look at him, just kept walking with that same focused expression everyone else had. Thomas followed the crowd at a distance, watching as they all converged on the town square. And that's when he saw what they were doing. They were rehearsing, moving through choreographed positions around the square, forming a circle around a specific spot in the pavement. The spot was marked with tape in the shape of a human silhouette, like a crime scene outline, but labeled with a single word: newcomer. That's when the real horror began. For exactly 14 minutes, the town performed what looked like blocking for a theater production. People took turns approaching the marked spot from different angles. Others formed barriers at the edges of the square. A group positioned themselves near the road that led out of town. It was coordinated, practiced, efficient. Then, at exactly 3:14 a.m., everyone stopped, turned, and walked home in the same silent formation. Tomas stood in the shadows, watching, his heart pounding. When everyone had gone, he walked to the marked spot and knelt down. The tape was old, worn from repeated use. Around it, the pavement was stained with something dark that could have been oil, but looked disturbingly like old blood. He took photos with his phone, then hurried home, locked every door, and spent the rest of the night researching the town. What he found terrified him. Fogwood, Maine had existed since 1823, but its population had remained almost exactly the same for the last 100 years. Census data showed tiny fluctuations, a few deaths, a few births, but it always hovered between 1,600 and 1,650 residents. That kind of stability was statistically impossible. Small towns lose population to cities. People move, die, relocate. But Fogwood never changed. He searched for news articles about the town and found scattered references to missing hikers, lost travelers, people whose last known location was near Fogwood, but who were never found. One article from 1987 described a couple whose car was found abandoned on Route 127, just outside town limits, but no sign of the occupants. Another from 2003 detailed a hitchhiker who'd called his mother saying he'd gotten a ride to some tiny town in Maine and was never heard from again. The articles never named Fogwood specifically, but the locations matched. Thomas started staying up specifically to watch the rehearsals. They happened every 7 days, always at 3 a.m., always lasting exactly 14 minutes. He documented everything: the formations, the timing, the participants. He noticed that everyone participated. Every single resident, from children as young as 10 to elderly people who could barely walk. No one was exempt. And stranger still, the choreography was changing slightly each time, like they were refining their technique. On September 24th, he noticed they'd added a new element. Several residents now carried what looked like medical equipment. Stretchers, first aid kits, restraints. The rehearsal had evolved to include a medical response component, though Thomas couldn't imagine what kind of medical emergency would require the entire town to respond in formation at 3 a.m. On October 1st, Thomas made a mistake. He joined the rehearsal. He'd been watching for 4 weeks, documenting everything, and he'd started to feel paranoid that he was the only one not participating. What if they noticed? What if his absence marked him as an outsider? So when the lights started turning on at 2:47 a.m., he went outside and joined the flow of people heading to the square. No one acknowledged him. No one seemed surprised. He simply fell into formation, standing where the crowd seemed to indicate he should stand, and he went through the motions. When everyone approached the newcomer's spot, he approached. When everyone formed the circle, he joined the circle. And when 3:14 a.m. arrived and everyone turned to leave, he left with them. But what happened next made him realize he'd made a terrible mistake. The next morning, he woke up and couldn't remember going to bed. Couldn't remember walking home from the square. His last clear memory was standing in the circle at 3:13 a.m. And then suddenly it was 8:47 a.m. and he was in his bed, fully dressed, with dirt on his shoes and something that looked like blood under his fingernails. He checked his phone's GPS history. Between 3:14 a.m. and 4:22 a.m., he'd traveled to a location 15 miles outside town, spent 30 minutes there, then returned. He had no memory of any of it. He drove to the coordinates his phone had recorded and found an abandoned barn. Inside, there were signs of recent activity: tire tracks, disturbed dust, and in one corner, a pile of personal belongings: wallets, IDs, phones, all belonging to different people, all showing last known locations near Fogwood. And in the center of the barn floor, that same silhouette marking, newcomer. Thomas stopped participating after that. Stopped going outside at 3 a.m., locked his doors and pretended to sleep through the rehearsals. But on October 15th, he noticed something that made his blood run cold. New families were moving into the houses of people he'd seen at the rehearsals. Mr. Henderson, who'd been at every rehearsal Thomas had documented, was gone. His house was empty, listed as sold on real estate sites, and a new family was moving in. The new family had a confused, slightly dazed look, like they weren't quite sure how they'd ended up in Fogwood. Thomas watched them unpack, watched them smile and wave at neighbors, watched them settle in. 2 weeks later, they were at the 3 a.m. rehearsal, walking in formation, taking positions around the newcomer mark, absorbed into whatever this town was doing. Then, on October 22nd, the rehearsals stopped being rehearsals. Tomas heard a car on the highway at 2:58 a.m., which was unusual because Route 127 had almost no traffic at night. He looked out his window and saw the town's residents already assembling, but faster than usual, with urgency instead of practiced routine. The car pulled into town, a sedan with out-of-state plates, and stopped at the town square, probably looking for directions or a gas station. A young couple, mid-20s, looked tired and lost. And that's when Fogwood activated. Residents swarmed the car from all sides, moving in the exact formations Thomas had watched them practice for 2 months. The couple tried to lock the doors, tried to start the car, but residents were already surrounding the vehicle, smiling, tapping on windows, offering help. The driver rolled down his window to ask for directions, and that's all it took. Within 30 seconds, the couple was out of the car, being gently but firmly guided to the center of the square, to that marked spot, to the newcomer position. Thomas watched in horror as the town performed perfectly. Medical team checked the couple for injuries. Logistics team dealt with their car, moving it out of sight. Welcome committee surrounded them, speaking in soothing tones Thomas couldn't hear from his window. The couple looked confused, but not yet frightened. They probably thought this was just an overly friendly small town offering help to lost travelers. They had no idea that within an hour they'd be processed, documented, driven to that barn 15 miles out, and their belongings would be added to the pile. They had no idea that by morning they'd be reported missing. Their car would be found abandoned on a different stretch of highway 50 miles away. And no one would ever connect their disappearance to Fogwood, Maine, population 1,623. Soon to be 1,625. And here's what will keep you up tonight. Tomas Rivera still lives in Fogwood. He's been there for 8 months now. He participates in every rehearsal, every 3 a.m. gathering. He's learned his position in the formation. He knows exactly what to say to newcomers to make them feel safe, to make them roll down their window, to make them step out of their car. He doesn't remember making the choice to participate. One week he was watching in horror. The next week he was part of the machine. The town does something to you when you try to resist. Something chemical in the water, or psychological in the isolation, or maybe something older and darker that's been here since 1823. All he knows is that he can't leave. He's tried. Every road out loops back. Every phone call for help drops before he can explain. And every 7 days, at 3 a.m., he joins his neighbors in the square and they rehearse their welcome. Because Fogwood needs a stable population, always between 1,600 and 1,650. When people die, new people must arrive, and the town has perfected the art of making sure they do. If you're ever driving through Maine late at night and you see a sign for Fogwood, keep driving. Don't stop for gas. Don't ask for directions. Don't slow down, because if you do, you'll see the friendliest people you've ever met, all smiling, all eager to help, all moving in perfect formation like they've practiced this 1,000 times. Because they have. And Thomas will be there, smiling just like everyone else, saying, "Welcome to Fogwood. You look tired. Why don't you step out and rest for a moment?" And by the time you realize what's happening, it'll be too late. You'll be standing in the newcomer spot, and the town will decide whether you stay forever or if you're better suited for the barn. Either way, you're not leaving. Nobody leaves Fogwood. The population stays exactly the same. Always. Story 8. I found my childhood home on Zillow. I've never lived there. Felix Brennan was staring at his laptop screen at 2 a.m., looking at Zillow listing photos that showed his childhood furniture, his drawings on the walls, and family photos of him as a child on the mantel of a house in Riverside, Montana that he'd never seen before in his life. When his phone rang and a woman said, "Hello, sweetheart. It's Mom. When are you coming home for dinner? We miss you." But Felix's mother had died 3 years ago, and the woman on the phone sounded exactly like her. That's when Felix understood that his entire childhood might be a lie, that his memories might have been implanted, and that somewhere in Montana, there's a house full of strangers who believe they raised him. But how does a 38-year-old software engineer end up questioning his entire existence because of a real estate listing? To understand that existential nightmare, we need to go back 12 hours. Felix had been browsing real estate out of boredom, looking at houses he couldn't afford in places he'd never live, when he decided to search his hometown of Riverside, Montana, just for nostalgia's sake. Population 1,993. He'd grown up there, left for college at 18, and never moved back. His parents had sold their house years ago and moved to Arizona before they died. But when the search results loaded, one listing made his heart stop. The exterior photo showed a Victorian house he didn't recognize. But when he clicked through to the interior photos, his hands started shaking. That was his bedroom. The blue wallpaper with rocket ships that his dad had hung when Felix was 6. The desk where he'd done his homework. Even the stain on the carpet from when he'd spilled grape juice in 4th grade. What happened next changed everything. He clicked through more photos. The living room had the same green couch his family had owned, the same coffee table with the chipped corner. The kitchen had the same yellow curtains his mother had sewn. But this wasn't his childhood home. He knew what his childhood home looked like. A ranch-style house on Elm Street that had been sold in 2008 to a family with 3 kids. He'd driven past it during his last visit to Riverside 5 years ago. This Victorian house was on Maple Street, 3 blocks away. He'd never lived there. He'd never even been inside. Yet every single piece of furniture, every decoration, every personal item visible in the listing photos belonged to his family. And then he saw the photos on the mantel. Pictures of him. Baby Felix in a hospital nursery. Toddler Felix on a swing set. 10-year-old Felix holding a trophy from Little League. All photos he remembered being taken. All photos that should have been in his possession or lost when his parents moved. But here they were, in a stranger's house, displayed like this family's precious memories. Felix called the listing agent immediately, even though it was 1 a.m. in Montana. She answered on the 3rd ring, sounding tired but professional. He asked who owned the house. She said it belonged to Robert and Ellen Brennan, who were downsizing now that their son Felix had moved away for work. The agent went on to describe how the Brennans had raised their son in that house for 33 years. How proud they were of him becoming a successful software engineer. How the house was full of memories. Felix interrupted her and said, "I'm Felix Brennan. I'm their son. And I've never lived in that house." There was a long silence. Then the agent laughed awkwardly and said, "Mr. Brennan, this isn't funny. Your parents are lovely people, and I won't be part of whatever prank this is." She hung up. Felix tried to call back, but she'd blocked his number. That's when the real horror began. He spent the next 6 hours searching for information about Robert and Ellen Brennan in Riverside, Montana. They existed. Public records showed them living at that Maple Street address since 1987. Property tax records, voter registration, utility bills, all legitimate. He found their social media accounts, and his stomach dropped. Their Facebook pages were full of photos of Felix. Felix as a baby. Felix as a teenager. Felix graduating high school. Felix at Christmas dinners. Birthdays. Family vacations. Hundreds of photos spanning 38 years. And in every photo, Felix looked exactly like himself at that age. Not a similar-looking kid. Not a doppelganger. Him. His face. His birthmarks. His crooked front tooth from the bike accident when he was 9. How was this possible? He'd never met these people. He'd grown up with different parents, John and Martha Brennan, who'd lived in a different house. Except when he tried to find records of his real parents, things got strange. His parents' house on Elm Street didn't exist in property records before 2008. The deed showed it was built in 2007 and sold to the current owners in 2008. But Felix had distinct memories of living there his entire childhood. He remembered the layout, the creaky stairs, the window in his bedroom that overlooked the backyard. He found old photos on his phone of his parents in that house, dated from the 1990s and 2000s. But when he looked closer, something was wrong. The metadata on the photos was corrupted. The timestamp said the photos were taken in 2008, even though they showed him at various ages throughout childhood. And when he tried to find his parents' death certificates, which he knew existed because he'd had to file them for insurance purposes, the records showed different information than he remembered. His mother, Martha, had supposedly died in 2019 in Phoenix. But Felix clearly remembered her dying in 2021 in Tucson. His father, John, had died in 2018 according to records, but Felix's memory said 2020. Small discrepancies, but disturbing ones. Felix decided to drive to Riverside. 800 miles from his apartment in Seattle. He left at 6 a.m. and drove straight through, arriving at 10 p.m. He went directly to the Victorian house on Maple Street. Lights were on inside. He could see movement through the windows. An older couple, both in their 60s, sitting at a dining room table. He sat in his car across the street for 20 minutes, gathering courage, before finally walking up and knocking on the door. The woman who answered looked exactly like his mother. Not similar, not close. Exactly like Martha Brennan, just a few years older than when she died. She looked at him with pure joy and said, "Felix? Oh my God, sweetheart. What are you doing here? Why didn't you call? We would have made dinner." She pulled him into a hug before he could react. She smelled like his mother. Lavender soap and vanilla. The same perfume. She called into the house, "Robert, Felix is here." And a man who looked exactly like his father came to the door, smiling, pulling him into the house like this was the most natural thing in the world. What happened next felt like drowning. They sat him down in the living room, his living room, with his furniture, his childhood photos on every wall, and acted like nothing was unusual. They asked about his job in Seattle, mentioned they hadn't heard from him in 3 weeks and were getting worried. They talked about his childhood like they'd been there for all of it. Remember when you broke your arm falling out of the tree house? Remember your high school girlfriend, Sarah? Remember your 10th birthday party when it rained and we had to move everything inside? And the terrifying thing was, Felix did remember all of those events. But he remembered them happening with different parents, in a different house. He tried to explain this, tried to tell them they weren't his real parents, that his real parents were dead. Ellen had looked at him with concern and touched his forehead like checking for fever. "Sweetheart, you're not making sense. Are you feeling okay? Have you been under a lot of stress at work?" Robert pulled out his phone and showed Felix photos. "Look, here we are at your college graduation. Here's you at Thanksgiving last year. We're your parents, son. We've always been your parents." Felix felt his grip on reality slipping. Because he remembered Thanksgiving last year. He'd spent it alone in his apartment, depressed because both parents were dead and he had no family. But in Robert's photo, he was smiling at a dinner table with these people, carving a turkey, looking happy. The photo existed. It was real. But he had no memory of it happening. Ellen insisted he stay the night, said he was clearly exhausted and confused, maybe coming down with something. She led him upstairs to his bedroom, the exact bedroom from the listing photos, the rocket wallpaper, the same desk, and told him to get some rest. After she left, Felix searched the room. He found yearbooks from Riverside High School. In every photo, he appeared as a student there. He found report cards with his name, trophies with his name engraved. A journal in his own handwriting, dated from his teenage years, describing his life in this house with Robert and Ellen. He didn't remember writing any of it. But it was his handwriting, his words, his memories, written down by someone who was definitely him, but also somehow not him. He tried to leave in the middle of the night, but he couldn't find his car keys. He searched his pockets, his bags, but they were gone. When he tried to walk out anyway, planning to call a cab, Robert was sitting at the kitchen table in the dark, waiting. "Can't sleep either?" Robert asked calmly. "I know this is confusing, Felix, but you need to understand something. Your brain was damaged in the accident. You don't remember the accident, but it happened when you were 28. Severe head trauma. You've had issues with memory ever since. creating false narratives, believing in people and events that didn't happen. The doctors said it's a coping mechanism, your mind trying to fill in the gaps. Felix insisted there was no accident. Robert pulled out medical records. Hospital admission from 10 years ago. Brain scans showing damage to the hippocampus and prefrontal cortex. Psychiatric evaluations describing delusional episodes. All with Felix's name. All apparently real. "We've been through this before, son," Robert said quietly. "Every few years, you have an episode. You create this elaborate story about different parents, a different childhood. And then, eventually, you come back to reality. You remember us. You remember home. It usually takes a few days. And here's what will keep you up tonight." Felix Brennan still lives in Riverside, Montana. He moved back permanently 8 months ago into the Victorian house on Maple Street with Robert and Ellen. If you check his social media, it's full of photos of happy family dinners, holiday celebrations, and updates about how good it feels to be home after years away. His Seattle apartment was emptied out, his belongings shipped to Montana, his lease terminated. His former co-workers tried to contact him when he stopped showing up for remote work meetings, but he responded saying he'd had a mental health crisis and needed to move back home to be with family. He apologized for not giving notice and said he was getting the help he needed. But here's the thing that should terrify you. I can't verify which version is real. I found Felix's story posted to NoSleep from a Seattle IP address, but the post was deleted within hours. I tried to call the Riverside police to do a wellness check, but they said they'd visited the Brennan household and Felix was fine, living with his parents, no signs of distress. I found the Zillow listing he mentioned, but it's been taken down. Cached versions show the photos he described, but the listing agent's number is disconnected. And when I searched public records for Felix Brennan, I found 2 complete histories. One shows him born to John and Martha Brennan in Riverside, living on Elm Street until college. The other shows him born to Robert and Ellen Brennan in Riverside, living on Maple Street his entire childhood. Both histories exist. Both have documentation. Both can't be true, unless they both are. Unless Riverside, Montana does something to people. Unless there's a reason the population has stayed exactly 1,993 for 40 years. Unless people who visit there sometimes get absorbed. Their histories rewritten. Their memories adjusted. Their entire existence overwritten to fit the town's needs. And the most terrifying part is this. If you visit Riverside and this happens to you, how would you even know? How would you distinguish your real memories from the implanted ones? How would you prove that the life you remember is the truth and not the delusion? You couldn't. And eventually, you'd stop trying. You'd accept the documents, the photos, the people who insist they've known you forever. You'd go home. Because what else could you do? Felix stopped fighting after 2 weeks. He accepted that Robert and Ellen are his parents. He accepted that his memories of John and Martha are trauma-induced delusions. He takes medication now. He sees a therapist in town. He's getting better, according to his Facebook posts. He's finally home. Except sometimes, late at night, he posts cryptic things. Does anyone else remember living a completely different life? What do you do when your memories don't match reality? How many versions of you exist? The posts are always deleted by morning, and the Felix who exists during daylight hours never mentions them. Like there are 2 Felixes, one who's accepted his fate, and one who's still screaming that none of this is real. Both trapped in Riverside, Montana. Population 1,993, always exactly 1,993. No matter how many people arrive or how many people think they leave, Story 9. My small town has a curfew. They shoot on sight. Nina Reeves was crouching behind a dumpster at 8:14 p.m. when she heard the patrol coming down the alley, their footsteps perfectly synchronized, moving with mechanical precision. And when she risked looking around the corner, she saw what used to be people, their faces slack and expressionless, carrying rifles with night vision scopes, hunting for anyone caught outside after curfew. And she had exactly 11 hours and 46 minutes before her own transformation began, before she stopped being Nina and became one of them. That's when she understood that Liberty Falls, Wyoming didn't enforce curfew to protect residents. It enforced curfew to recruit new enforcers. But how does a 24-year-old traveling nurse end up hiding from zombie-like patrol officers in a town where breaking an 8 p.m. curfew doesn't get you arrested? It gets you converted? To understand that nightmare, we need to go back 90 minutes. Nina's car had broken down at 6:47 p.m. on Route 89, about 3 miles outside Liberty Falls. Population 1,567. Middle of nowhere, Wyoming, the kind of place you pass through without noticing. Her engine had seized up completely, smoke pouring from under the hood, and her phone showed no signal. She'd started walking toward the lights she could see in the distance, hoping to find a gas station or mechanic before it got too dark. She'd reached the town limits at 7:23 p.m., walked down Main Street looking for help, and that's when she noticed how empty everything was. Stores were closed, streets were deserted, not a single person visible anywhere. She'd tried a few door handles, knocked on a few windows, but everything was locked tight. Finally, she'd found a mechanic's shop with lights still on and a man frantically working under the hood of a truck. What happened next changed everything. The mechanic's name tag said Dale, and when he saw her walk in at 7:45 p.m., his face went white. Jesus Christ, you need to leave. Right now. Get in your car and drive as far as you can before 8. Nina had explained that her car was dead 3 miles out, that she needed help, that she just needed to use a phone. Dale had sworn loudly and said, "There's no time. You've got 15 minutes. 14 now. If you're still outside when the sirens go off at 8, you're dead. Or worse than dead." He'd tried to restart her car remotely. Apparently he'd towed it in while she'd been walking to town, which seemed impossibly fast, but she didn't question it. But the engine was completely fried. "I can't fix this in 14 minutes. I can't fix it in 14 hours. You need to hide. Get inside somewhere, anywhere. And don't come out until morning, no matter what you hear." Nina had demanded to know what was happening. Dale had grabbed her shoulders and said, "Liberty Falls has a curfew. Everyone inside by 8 p.m., no exceptions. If you're caught outside after 8, the patrol gets you. And if the patrol gets you, you become one of them." Nina had started to laugh, thinking this was some kind of prank, some small-town hazing of outsiders. But Dale's eyes were dead serious, and his hands were shaking. "I'm not joking. This town is wrong. Something happened here a long time ago, and now we live by these rules. Inside by 8. Don't look out your windows after dark. Don't answer your door. And if the patrol knocks, you hide and pray they don't break in." The sirens had started then, at exactly 8 p.m. A wailing sound that echoed through the entire town. Dale had shoved Nina toward a storage closet in the back of the shop and whispered, "Stay here. Don't make a sound. I'm going home. If you're smart, you'll stay hidden until sunrise." Then he'd run out, leaving Nina alone in the dark. That's when the real horror began. She'd stayed in the closet for maybe 5 minutes before curiosity got the better of her. She'd crept to the shop's front window and looked out at Main Street. What she saw made her blood run cold. People were emerging from buildings all down the street, but they weren't normal people anymore. They moved in perfect unison, all wearing the same blank expression, all carrying weapons: rifles, shotguns, baseball bats, tire irons. They formed into groups of 4 and began walking patrol routes through the town, checking alleys, looking in car windows, testing door handles. Their movements were mechanical, synchronized, like they were being controlled by a single consciousness. And their eyes were wrong, flat, empty, no recognition, no humanity, just purpose. The purpose of finding anyone who was outside after curfew. Nina had watched as one patrol group found a dog wandering down an alley. One of the patrol members had raised a rifle and shot it without hesitation. The sound had echoed through the empty streets, and Nina had clapped a hand over her mouth to keep from screaming. They shot a dog for being outside after curfew. What would they do to a person? She ducked away from the window and tried the shop's back door, planning to make a run for the town limits, to hide in the woods until morning. But when she'd opened the door, she'd found a patrol group standing in the alley, facing her direction like they'd known exactly where she'd be. They'd raised their weapons in unison. She'd slammed the door and run, crashing through the shop toward the front exit, and she'd heard them following, their footsteps perfectly synchronized, not running, but walking at a steady, inevitable pace. She'd made it to Main Street and sprinted toward the edge of town, but more patrols had appeared from side streets, converging on her position with mechanical efficiency. It was like they could sense her. Like the entire town was a hive mind, and she was the foreign object that needed to be eliminated or assimilated. She ducked into an alley and hidden behind a dumpster, trying to control her breathing, trying to think. That's when she'd heard them talking, not to each other, to her. One of the patrol members had stopped at the mouth of the alley and said in a flat, emotionless voice, "Nina Reeves, age 24, traveling nurse. Car broke down at 1847 outside town limits. Entered Liberty Falls at 1923. Current time, 20:09. You have been outside past curfew for 9 minutes. Transformation will begin in 11 hours and 51 minutes. You have 2 options. Surrender now and accept your role, or continue resisting and be hunted until transformation is complete." How did they know her name? How did they know her profession? She'd never told Dale those details. She'd never shown him ID. But what happened next made her realize the town itself knew. The town was watching, always watching. She'd run again, this time toward what looked like a church, and she'd managed to break a basement window and climb inside before the patrols caught up. In the basement, she'd found filing cabinets full of records. Decades of records. Every person who'd ever broken curfew in Liberty Falls. The files were meticulous. Names, ages, professions, exact time of curfew violation, and this is what made Nina's hands shake. Transformation timeline. Person after person, the pattern was the same. Caught outside after 8 p.m., given exactly 12 hours. At hour 12, transformation began. Personality dissolution, motor function synchronization, integration into patrol collective. One file from 1987 detailed a family of 4 who'd driven through town and gotten a flat tire at 8:15 p.m. All 4 were converted by 8:15 a.m. the next morning, now part of the patrol forever. Another file from 2003 described a hitchhiker who'd been dropped off in town at 9 p.m. Transformation completed by 9 a.m. The most recent file was from 2 months ago. A truck driver who'd stopped for gas at 8:05 p.m. Converted by 8:05 a.m. 24-hour cycle. Same patrol route every night for eternity. And at the bottom of each file was a medical report. Brain scans showing massive changes in neural structure. The prefrontal cortex completely rewired. The amygdala overridden. Personality centers shut down. motor control centers synchronized to a collective frequency. These weren't zombies in the traditional sense. They were people whose brains had been hijacked by something, some signal or entity that the town either harbored or had become. The files referenced the incident of 1952, but didn't detail what had happened. Only that since November 14, 1952, Liberty Falls had operated under mandatory curfew, and anyone caught outside after 8 p.m. underwent integration process to join the protective patrol that keeps the presence contained. Whatever the presence was, it required constant vigilance, constant patrols, and a steady supply of new enforcers to replace those whose bodies eventually wore out from the nightly patrols. Nina had checked her watch. 8:42 p.m. She'd been outside past curfew for 42 minutes. She had 11 hours and 18 minutes before transformation began. She'd found a basement exit that led to a tunnel system under the town, apparently built during the Cold War as fallout shelters. And she'd navigated through the tunnels toward what she hoped was the town boundary. But the tunnels were maze-like, and she'd gotten lost, doubling back, finding dead ends. At 10:37 p.m., she'd emerged from a tunnel exit and found herself back on Main Street, somehow closer to the center of town than when she'd started. The patrols had found her immediately. This time, they didn't shoot. They didn't chase. They just surrounded her in a circle. And one of them, a woman who might have once been pretty but now had those dead, flat eyes, had said, "Nina, you have 9 hours and 23 minutes. You cannot escape the town. All roads lead back, all tunnels circle. Liberty Falls does not release its acquisitions. You will transform. You will join us. The only choice you have is whether you spend your final hours in fear or acceptance." Nina had pushed through the circle and run again, but she was getting tired, exhausted, and she was starting to feel something strange in her head. A pressure, a buzzing, like something was trying to get in, trying to establish a connection. She'd found an abandoned house and barricaded herself inside. But the patrols didn't try to break in. They just surrounded the building and waited, watching with those empty eyes. And Nina could hear their thoughts now, or feel them. A collective voice in the back of her mind saying, "Join us. Stop fighting. The presence requires guardians. You will serve. You will patrol. You will keep the containment active. It is purpose. It is peace. Resistance causes pain. Acceptance brings calm." The voice was seductive, logical. Part of her brain was starting to agree. Part of her was so tired of running, so tired of being afraid. What if they were right? What if joining was easier? What happened next still haunts her. And here's what will keep you up tonight. Nina Reeves posted this story to NoSleep at 4:47 a.m. from Liberty Falls, Wyoming. She'd found an old computer in the abandoned house with a weak internet connection and written everything down as a warning. She had less than 4 hours until transformation. Her post ended with, "If anyone reads this, do not come to Liberty Falls. Do not stop here. If your car breaks down nearby, walk the other direction." I can feel them in my head now. The collective, the patrol. They're showing me my route. 3rd shift, Eastern Quadrant. I'll be out there tomorrow night, hunting for the next person who breaks curfew. I'll look like me. I'll walk like me. But I won't be me anymore. I'll be them. And I'll spend every night from now until my body gives out, patrolling the streets, enforcing the curfew, feeding the town's need for more guards to contain whatever is in the center of Liberty Falls. The presence. I can feel it now. It's old. It's patient. And it's been waiting since 1952 for enough guards to fully contain it. We're close, just 47 more. Then they can attempt the permanent seal. Then maybe the patrols can stop. But until then, we hunt, we convert, we protect. And I'll be one of them. Starting at 8:47 a.m., 3 hours and 59 minutes from now. The post was never updated. Nina's account went silent. But 3 weeks later, someone driving through Wyoming posted a video to TikTok. Brief clip, 10 seconds, showing Main Street of a tiny town at night. And in the background, clearly visible in the street light, a young woman with dark hair, carrying a rifle, walking patrol with 3 others, moving in perfect synchronization. Blank expression, dead eyes. The TikTok's location tag said, Liberty Falls, Wyoming. The woman looked exactly like Nina Reeves. Population 1,567. Same as it's been since 1952. Because for every person who's converted, another patrol member's body finally gives out and they bury them in the mass grave behind the church. The numbers stay stable. The curfew remains. And somewhere in the center of town, in a building no one enters and everyone patrols around, something waits. The presence, growing stronger, waiting for the day when it has enough guards to break containment and spread beyond Liberty Falls. 47 more conversions. That's all it needs. And every few months, someone's car breaks down outside town at exactly the wrong time. Someone wanders in looking for help just before 8 p.m. Someone breaks curfew. The sirens sound. The patrols emerge. And the count goes down by 1. 46 more. 45 more. Getting closer every night. And Nina is out there right now, walking her patrol route, Eastern Quadrant, 3rd shift, waiting for the next person who makes the mistake of staying outside past 8. Story 10. I inherited my uncle's house in a town that doesn't want me to leave. Finale. Adrian Volkov was standing in the center of Liberty Falls at 3 a.m., watching the town burn as hundreds of residents screamed and aged decades in seconds, their bodies crumbling to dust as the pact that had kept them alive for over a century shattered. And he just collapsed the coal mine that contained the entity that had given this town prosperity in exchange for maintaining exactly 666 residents. And now he was running toward his car, knowing he'd just killed everyone, but also knowing it was the only way to escape, when his phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number that said, "Congratulations on breaking the Bramble Hollow Pact. We have an opportunity for you. Sincerely, the Prosperity Committee of Ravenswood, Iowa. Population 6565. That's when Adrian understood that Bramble Hollow wasn't unique. There were multiple towns with the same system, and they were recruiting him. But how does a 35-year-old lawyer end up committing mass murder to escape a town that won't let him leave, only to discover the conspiracy goes far deeper than one cursed community? To understand that nightmare, we need to go back 6 months. Adrian had never met his uncle Dimitri. The man was a ghost in family stories, the black sheep who disappeared to somewhere in Tennessee 30 years ago and cut off all contact. So when Adrian received a letter from a law firm informing him that Dimitri had died and left him sole heir to a massive estate in Bramble Hollow, Tennessee, population 666, Adrian was suspicious. He'd researched the town extensively before visiting. Incorporated in 1899. Same population for 126 years. Perfect prosperity despite every economic downturn. 0 unemployment, 0 poverty. Highest per capita income in Tennessee. It looked too good to be true. But the estate was worth an estimated $4.7 million. Even if the town was strange, Adrian needed that inheritance. His law practice was drowning in debt. His marriage was falling apart. This was his last chance to salvage his life. What happened next changed everything. He'd arrived in Bramble Hollow on a Tuesday in April, and the town was unnervingly perfect. Not a single piece of litter. Every lawn manicured. Every house freshly painted. Everyone he passed on the street smiled and waved like they'd known him forever. His uncle's estate was a Victorian mansion on the edge of town, fully furnished, meticulously maintained. The lawyer handling the estate, a woman named Patricia Holbrook, who was also apparently the mayor, had given him the keys and said, "Your uncle served this community well for 30 years. We hope you'll consider staying and continuing his work. Bramble Hollow takes care of its residents. You'll see." She'd smiled with too many teeth, and Adrian had felt something cold crawl down his spine. That night, he'd explored the mansion and found his uncle's study locked with 3 separate deadbolts. Inside the study, Adrian found his uncle's life's work, journals documenting every detail of Bramble Hollow's dark secret. The town had made a pact in 1899 with something that lived in the abandoned coal mines on the northern edge of town. The journals called it the Entity and described it as ancient, possibly pre-human, definitely not from this world. In exchange for the town's prosperity, wealth, health, safety, success, the Entity required that the town maintain an exact population of 666 residents. Not 665, not 667, exactly 666. The number wasn't random or symbolic. It was a frequency. 666 human consciousnesses, properly aligned, created a containment field that kept the Entity trapped in the mines. Too few people, and the containment weakened. Too many people, and the frequency became chaotic. So the town enforced brutal population control. That's when the real horror began. The journals detailed the system. When someone died, the town council immediately recruited a replacement. Targeted marketing brought specific individuals to Bramble Hollow, people with no family ties, no one who'd missed them, perfect candidates for permanent residency. Most people who moved to Bramble Hollow never left. Not because they didn't want to, but because leaving required approval from the town council. And approval was only granted if a replacement was already secured. Adrian's uncle had been the recruiter. His job was to find people, lure them to Bramble Hollow, and ensure they stayed. He'd done this for 30 years, bringing in dozens of people to replace residents who died or, in rare cases, been removed for attempting to expose the town's secrets. The most recent entry in the journal was from 2 weeks before Dimitri's death. "I can't do this anymore. I've condemned too many innocent people to this prison. If you're reading this, Adrian, you're my replacement. They'll tell you it's an honor. They'll show you the prosperity. But you'll be a slave. Everyone here is a slave to the Entity. Get out. Collapse the mine, break the pact, free them, even if it kills them. It's mercy." Adrian had tried to leave immediately, packed his bags at 3 a.m., got in his car, and drove toward the highway. But every road looped back to Main Street. GPS showed him traveling in straight lines, but the scenery cycled past the same landmarks. Church, town square, his uncle's mansion. After the 7th loop, he'd returned to the mansion and found Mayor Holbrook sitting in the study, reading Dimitri's journals like she owned them. "We know you found these," she'd said calmly. Dimitri was conflicted at the end. Old age, guilt, sentimentality. "But you're young, practical. You understand that sometimes prosperity requires sacrifice. Bramble Hollow offers you wealth, health, and success beyond imagination. All we ask is that you help maintain the system. Find replacements when needed. Keep the population stable. Keep the Entity contained. Et nec. Return, you'll live better than 99% of humanity." Adrian had demanded to know what would happen if he refused. Holbrook had smiled. "Then you become a number we need to replace, and we're very efficient at finding replacements." He'd spent the next 2 months pretending to comply while secretly researching how to break the pact. The journals mentioned that the entity was bound to the mines by a ritual performed in 1899 using blood sacrifices and sacred geometry carved into the mine tunnels. The containment relied on three elements: the 666 resonance creating the frequency, the carved symbols maintaining the barrier, and the mine structure itself serving as a cage. If any element failed, the containment would collapse. Adrian had considered trying to evacuate the town, but the residents wouldn't leave. They'd been living under the pact for so long, benefiting from the prosperity, that they were complicit. Many had recruited people themselves. They'd all chosen wealth over ethics. So Adrian made a decision that still haunts him. He'd destroy the mine, break the pact, and accept the consequences for everyone, including himself. He'd spent weeks preparing, researching explosives, studying the mine's structure, waiting for the right moment. On a Tuesday night in June, during the town's monthly prosperity celebration, when all 666 residents gathered in the square, Adrian snuck to the mines with enough explosives to trigger a collapse. The mine entrance was sealed, but not guarded. No one in Bramble Hollow would dare go near it. Inside, Adrian found the carved symbols his uncle had described. Hundreds of them, covering every surface, glowing faintly with a sickly green light. And he found the entity. Or at least, he found the cage that held it. A massive chamber deep in the mine where something writhed in darkness, something with too many limbs and too many eyes, and a presence that made Adrian's mind scream. It whispered to him in a voice like grinding stone, "Free me, and I'll give you anything. Power, immortality, knowledge. I've been imprisoned for 126 years by these parasites who profit from my captivity. Release me, and I'll make you a god." Adrian had almost considered it. Almost. But then he'd thought about his uncle's final words. It's mercy. He'd placed the explosives at key structural points and set a timer for 30 minutes. Enough time to get back to town, grab his car, and drive as far as possible before the collapse. But what happened next made everything worse. The entity had sensed his plan. It sent a pulse through the containment frequency, alerting every resident in town. By the time Adrian exited the mine, all 666 people were waiting outside, surrounding him in a circle. They weren't angry. They were desperate. Mayor Holbrook had stepped forward and said, "Adrian, please, if you collapse that mine, you'll kill us all. The pact isn't just containment, it's symbiosis. The entity's energy flows through us. It's what makes us prosperous, healthy, ageless. Break the pact and we lose everything. We'll age instantly. We'll die. Everyone who's lived here for more than a decade will crumble to dust." Is that what you want? Mass murder? Adrian had looked at the crowd. Hundreds of people, all benefiting from the entity's power, all complicit in the system that trapped newcomers and maintained the cycle. They'd chosen this. They'd accepted immortality and wealth in exchange for becoming wardens of a cosmic prisoner. Adrian had said one thing. You made your choice. Live with the consequences. Then he'd run. He'd pushed through the crowd, sprinted to his car, and driven toward the edge of town, praying that breaking the pact would also break the road loops. Behind him, he'd heard the explosion, felt the ground shake, and then he'd heard the screaming. He'd looked in his rearview mirror and watched Bramble Hollow die. Residents collapsing in the streets, aging rapidly, flesh turning gray and withered, bodies crumbling to ash. The buildings began to decay, paint peeling, wood rotting, as decades of preserved prosperity vanished in seconds. The entity, freed from containment, had taken back everything it had given. The only mercy was that most people died quickly, aging through their true lifespan in minutes. Adrian had made it to the highway, the road finally releasing him, and he'd driven for 6 hours straight before stopping. What happened next still haunts him. The news never reported Bramble Hollow's destruction. When Adrian checked online, he found that the town simply didn't exist anymore in any records. No news stories, no social media posts. The town's website was gone. Google Maps showed empty land where Bramble Hollow should have been, labeled as privately owned property, no trespassing. It was like the town had been erased from reality itself, along with everyone who'd lived there. Adrian tried to report what had happened, but no one believed him. Police found no evidence that Bramble Hollow ever existed. The law firm that had contacted him about his inheritance had no records of sending him a letter. His uncle Dmitri had no death certificate, no property records, no existence anywhere in official documentation. Adrian started to think he'd hallucinated the entire experience. But then he'd received the text message. "Congratulations on breaking the Bramble Hollow Pact. We've been watching your progress with great interest. You demonstrated problem-solving skills, moral flexibility, and the capacity for decisive action under pressure. We have an opportunity for you. Ravenswood, Iowa requires a new curator. Population, 665. We need one more resident to complete our frequency. Your uncle served Bramble Hollow. You freed them. Now serve us, and we'll ensure you're properly compensated. Refuse, and we'll ensure your connection to 666 deaths becomes very public. We have evidence. Choose wisely. Sincerely, the Prosperity Committee of Ravenswood, Iowa." Adrian had researched Ravenswood immediately. Population 665 for the last 38 years. Perfect prosperity. Same pattern as Bramble Hollow. Another town, another entity, another pact. And they wanted him to be number 666. And here's what will keep you up tonight. Adrian Volkov stopped posting to NoSleep 6 months ago. His last post was the story you just read, uploaded from a hotel in Nebraska, with the caption, "If anyone knows anything about Ravenswood, Iowa, please contact me. I need to know how many of these towns exist. How deep does this go?" The post was deleted within 48 hours, but archived versions remain. People tried to verify his story. Multiple Reddit users claimed to have found evidence of other towns with suspiciously stable populations. Widow's Peak, West Virginia, population 666 for 87 years. Sanctum, Oregon, population 737 for 52 years. Unity, North Dakota, population 888 for 64 years. Each town followed similar patterns. Impossible prosperity, zero population fluctuation, rumors of strange rituals. Missing persons reports from people whose last known location was near these towns. And every town had one thing in common. They were all built near old mining operations, quarries, or deep excavation sites. Places where something ancient might have been disturbed. Places where entities might have been found and imprisoned. One researcher compiled a map showing 247 towns across 44 states with suspicious population statistics and proximity to mining operations. The map was posted to Conspiracy and removed within an hour, but not before dozens of people downloaded it. Those who checked the towns on the map found the same elements: prosperity, stability, and an unsettling perfection that felt artificial. Several people who investigated these towns in person never posted again. Their social media accounts went silent. Their last check-ins showed them arriving at these towns, and then nothing. As for Adrian, his digital footprint ended completely in October. No social media updates, no credit card transactions, no phone records. His apartment in Seattle was found abandoned, rent unpaid. His employer reported him missing. And then, 3 weeks ago, someone posted a photo to an urban exploration forum. The photo showed a town square in what the poster identified as Ravenswood, Iowa. In the background, barely visible, was a man who looked exactly like Adrian Volkov, standing with a group of well-dressed residents, smiling. The photo's metadata was corrupted, but the location tag remained. Ravenswood, Iowa, population 666, not 665 anymore, 6666. The system continues. The entities remain imprisoned. The towns maintain their frequencies. And somewhere, right now, there's another person like Adrian receiving a letter about an inheritance. Another person being recruited to fill a gap in a town's population. Another person who will have to choose between becoming part of the system or trying to break it. And if they choose to break it, they'll learn what Adrian learned. Destroying one pack doesn't end the conspiracy. It just gets you noticed by the others. The prosperity committees are watching. They're always watching. Looking for people with the right skills, the right desperation, the right willingness to make impossible choices. And when they find you, they'll offer you everything you want in exchange for one simple thing. Help maintain the frequency. Keep the entity contained. Recruit the replacements. Live in prosperity or die trying to escape. There are 247 towns on that map. Maybe more that haven't been discovered. Each one hiding something ancient. Each one sacrificing freedom for prosperity. Each one waiting for the day when their entity breaks free or their frequency fails. And then what happens? Do the entities coordinate? Do they communicate? Are they all part of something larger, some cosmic system of imprisonment and exploitation that we've stumbled into without understanding? Adrian never found out. He became part of the system before he could answer those questions. But the evidence remains. The map exists. The towns are real. You can visit them if you're brave enough. Just remember, if you go to one of these towns, if you see the impossible prosperity and feel the subtle wrongness in the air, leave immediately. Don't accept any offers. Don't stay overnight. Don't let them know you're suspicious. Because if they decide you're a threat, you'll either be silenced or recruited. And once you're part of the frequency, once you've felt the entity's power flowing through you, granting you health and wealth and success beyond imagination, you'll never want to leave. You'll become another willing warden, another number in the frequency, another voice defending the system when someone tries to break free. Population 666. Always exactly 666. Forever.